Brother Bernard here again. Now, the last time that I told you a story in this exact spot, it was in the middle of driving, freezing snow, a long time ago. And here I am with the book itself, Tales of Britain, to share a different story with you. But it's another Welsh story. In fact, this story you could actually travel to on quite a nice sunny afternoon from the site of the previous story, because it's all in the Snowdonia area. But it seems very suitable to tell the story about Britain at this time in Britain's history. So I hope you enjoy it. This story is quite well known, and it's called Merlin and the Dragons. Now, it may disappoint you to learn that there was probably more than one Merlin, or if you prefer, actually Merthin, with the two Ds making a TH sound. It's probably not so much that different folk took on the role of Merlin in the same way that a superhero steps into another's shoes. Perhaps wizardry was just a family tradition. It's even slurred in some quarters that a Merlin built Stonehenge in Wiltshire all those thousands of years ago. And then there was Merlin the Wild, a 6th century bard who messed up an important battle for his master one day and ran out into the woods to spend the rest of his life as a gibbering, grizzled hermit, forever spouting forth his endless poetic prophecies, which all generally translated in some way or other as "watch out." Anyway, we're talking about a different Merlin here, the most celebrated Merlin of all, the Merlin Emrys, who folks say taught King Arthur so well. According to many, this particular Merlin was born in Carnarvon in Wales. Carnarvon is a stupendously ancient town whose name actually translates as sea fort. So it's probably more likely that the Merlins took their name from the place where he was born, Caer Merthin, than the other way around. Anyway, this Merlin was a very bright boy of Emrys, and he was, so gossips gossiped, the son of a demon of some kind. Now, in those days, people used to call all sorts of things demons, whether they were, just people with dodgy haircuts or just goths. Anyway, this very bright boy, who they said came from a demon, this demon apparently had seduced his poor kind mother Adna, and he had come out one way or another a little bit odd, and so obviously he came in for all kinds of teasing from the other kids of Carnarvon. That was why this young Merlin was so weird, they said, because of the whole demon thing. But 5th century peasants can be so cruel. What Merlin Emrys was talented. Now, when Merlin was a lad, the ruler of much of Britain was called King Vortigern, and he was a bad king, truly rubbish. Nobody could say for sure that he was a bad person, evil or anything like that, but it's clear that his crown did not fit his great big head. He lost all his battles, and even the king's speech he gave every winter solstice was really boring. Since the Romans had packed up and gone home, this Vortigern was put in charge of a kingdom with Picts bearing down on him from the north, pirates in the seas all around him, and endless tribal uprisings, and so he made a historically stupid decision. Well, actually, it's worth pausing for a moment to add that the decisions that this King Vortigern made weren't necessarily his own, but came from a council of self-claimed wise elders. Where once Britain had been dominated by the ancient wisdom of the Druids, since the Romans had come along and killed nearly all of them, these weirdos were all that remained. Nobody had actually voted for these officious officials, and they all had very curious ideas of how the world worked. There were 3 of them, all men, obviously. They all had long white beards, long robes, and short attention spans. Now, Vortigern had only just really got on the throne when suddenly he had this awful idea of getting all the most far stronger foreign powers to come over here and help him out. And those foreign powers were obviously going to do nothing but strip Britain of anything they had of any worth. But again, this was the advice of those wise elders, and so he wrote a letter. In this case, the armies that he invited over, they were from an area of Central Europe, sort of Swiss, kind of Germanic kind of thing. All these different tribes, some were called Angles, some were called Saxons. Later they sort of teamed up and called themselves the Anglo-Saxons, and you might know them as the English. But at that point, they were the foreign powers, and they were led by 2 big, brawny, blonde guys called Hengist and Horsa. And so with advice from these beardy weirdies, King Vortigern wrote a letter to Hengist and Horsa, and I've got it here. It said, if only you big burly fellows would travel over to Albion, I, King Vortigern, would happily give you a tasty slice of Kent or something in return for fighting all my battles for me, you know, Picts, pirates, that sort of thing, you know, basic security. Hope to see you soon. Love, King V. Kiss, kiss. This invitation was, of course, hastily accepted, but once these shaggy, Englishish invaders arrived on British soil, they found the place very comfy indeed, thank you very much, and decided they'd rather like a lot more of it for keepsies. And if the rubbish big-head King Vortigern didn't like it, they asked him, whose army was going to stop them? King Vortigern and his gaggle of daft wise men ran away out far west, like so many Britons before him, to the hills of Cymru, or as these Saxon invaders called it, Wales. Which is a bit cheeky when you think about it, considering they'd only just come here and found these people, because the word Wales, or Welsh, is actually Saxon for stranger, which is a bit like a burglar breaking into your house in the middle of the night, and when you go down and interrupt them stealing all your stuff, they turn around and say, hello, stranger, what are you doing here? That's my house. Anyway, that's my own problem. We'll move on from that. Anyway, Vortigern goes out to Wales, to the hills, and tries, of course, like any king before him, to build a castle. And once a likely hill had been found to set up his new court, Vortigern couldn't even build a simple castle on top of it. That's how bad he was at being king. Every time one stony tower had just about been built on the top, and the cement was just beginning to set, there would be a crack, and a great big wobbly sound, and a thundery, boulders falling all over the place kind of noise, and the whole hill and the castle on top of it would all just come tumbling down every single time. That's the third castle this month! Vortigern squealed with frustration and turned to his advisors. What am I doing wrong, lads? The three beardy weirdies all got together and they ummed and ahed and conferred with each other in the corner of the rubble. Before long, urgently whispered cries of, but I don't know, and perhaps a supporting joist and such like were heard. And eventually, the tallest advisor turned and told his boss, it's terribly simple, sir. The only way to build a proper castle here is to find, somewhere in the land, a young poor person. Oh, yes, poor. I think he should be poor. Oh, definitely very poor. It's always the poor people, isn't it? Yes. Well, we find this young poor person. Oh, preferably one born of a demon in some way. We bring him to this spot, completely naked. Naked? Oh, yes, of course, he's got to be naked. Yes, naked, completely naked. And then we tear out their gizzards and fling them all around the foundations of the castle. That ought to do it, don't you think? Yes. Well, yes, since you happen to mention it, yes, Vortigern replied. Pretty obvious now I come to think of it, which I do. And so, poor Merlin Emrys, aged no more than 14, was dragged from his mother's home, which was in a dell just to the north of Vortigern's construction site. This Merlin was tall for his age and a sallow-looking boy with long hair and flashing eyes, which bore into everyone he flashed them on. But there was always at least half a laugh in his every word and look. The situation was explained to him. So, he responded at length, you think that successful castle construction is down mainly to child murder and random butchery? That's right, smiled Vortigern, reaching up yet again to prevent his crown slipping off his bulbous head. Why, I'd be terribly grateful to you know, if you could just, see your way clear to, you know. And he giggled and poked his tongue out and so on. The tallest advisor removed a very sharp and shiny blade from the folds of his gown and gave Merlin another very wide and very insincere smile. Now, hang on a moment, Merlin began. That sounds like I know that is the right way to react when somebody is going to split up a 14-year-old. 14 people all over the place, but, we didn't have you in the 6th century AD, so anyway, getting back to it. Now hang on a moment, Merlin began. That sounds like a very silly way of going about things to me. The old wise fools looked very offended at this, but they had no time to interrupt because Merlin was already having one of what his mother called his moments. Somehow the awkward young lad had always been blessed with strange moments of great insight, and now he had one to share with the king. Oh, there was another loud cracking sound and the hill wobbled once again. Ah! I can see why your castle cannot be built here. Or rather, I can't see it, but I can hear it, and I can feel it under the stones. Follow me, and bring plenty of spades. So the whole throng followed young Merlin down into the foundations of the hill fort, and at the boy's suggestion, they instructed the workers to prise up a large rock in the centre of the pit. Beneath the rock was a lake. Well, it was more of a puddle, to be honest, but the water wasn't important. It was what was splashing around in it that made everyone gape. The cavern reverberated with gasps as all assembled saw two little but fierce lizard-like creatures. One was a deep red, the other a pallid white, and both had scaly wings and tiny puffs of fire protruding from their noses. These two dragons, because dragons they obviously were having a battle, hammer and tongs in the middle of the hole. First, the white one slapped the red one right across the chops with an almighty thwack. Next, the red one came back with a meaty punch, which set the whole cavern a-rumbling about. You, my lord, have a very bad case of worms, Merlin laughed. They look like dragons to me, simpered King Vortigern. Very closely related cousins, sir, Merlin went on, as are these two. These are the dragons whose noisy screams forced old King Lud to seal them up in this very hill. The white fighter is from over the seas, belonging to these English, who you so kindly invited over to kill and pillage the people, my lord. Because of the dazzling smile with which this was said, Vortigern did not even have time to work out that he was being offended before the sparky young Merlin went on. The red dragon has been here for a lot longer and will remain. In fact, both will remain upon this island for centuries to come, and both will keep fighting until a great person is found who can unite them both and build a Britain of peace for all. I'm afraid to tell you, Merlin concluded with a stylish bow, that great person is never going to be you, King Vortigern. Sorry about that, but we can't all be beloved legendary figures, I suppose. It was an eloquent and important speech, but few of Vortigern's old advisers paid it much heed. All three long-bearded men were frozen with fear at the sight of the little fighting dragons, and they'd all pulled their robes up tight around their thighs and were up on rocks, dribbling with terror at the idea of one of the tiny dragon cousins flying up their pants. "Master," the tallest one cried, "let us leave this place and build elsewhere, maybe a bungalow." Quite right, agreed Vortigern. I don't want to live in a place infested with worms. Okay, then, you can keep the place, my lad. Righto, come on, everyone. Chop, chop, castles to build, battles to lose. Sorry, I mean win, obviously. We better pack up camp and move, I don't know, over there somewhere, I don't know. Oh, you're farther away from those horrible Hengist and Horser guys, anyway. I don't know, you'll think someone's a friend, and then they turn around and... King Vortigern's prattling grew quieter in the dusk air, and Merlin Emrys smiled and replaced the mighty rock over the warring worms with a simple wink to them both. He had lived to tell another tale, and the spot where he stood was to take his name, Dinas Emrys. It's still up there in Snowdonia now. You can go and stand exactly where Merlin and the dragons were. However, as young Merlin turned to trudge back home to his mother, he frowned. He knew that those two fighting worms meant many a bloody battle still lay ahead between the Britons and the English. And if there was only one good ruler out there to lead the fight for freedom, it was going to have to be his job to find that person and teach them all he could to make them a kind, wise leader of the people. Only then would the white and red dragons be forever at peace at last. Well, except perhaps when it came to rugby championships. Rugby championships? Merlin puzzled to himself aloud and shrugged. His work, whatever it was only just beginning. The end. I'll see you when the snow returns.